Okay, next one. Okay, and this little clip it's a little gruesome, so if you want to shut your eyes, you can. But it is a battle scene. But it's really to illustrate the battle strategies and why there were so many casualties.
Slocum's men moved cautiously through heavy woods. Barely 2 miles from where they started, they ran into advanced units of George Anderson's Confederate division. It was noon, and the two sides had found the brawl they had been looking for.
Notice the column.
But Lee's decisive reaction to Hooker's campaign was paying off. Lafayette McClaw's division was now at hand.
We advanced and drove the enemy for nearly a mile when a commanding hill was reached and held. The enemy opened on us a well-directed fire of artillery and infantry. Many of the officers and men were under fire for the first time, and I feel it just to say that their steadiness and gallantry were remarkable.
Okay, that gives you the sense of being in that battle, of just the formation. They're all lined up and they're just shooting at each other. And again, with that mini ball, causing many of those casualties. And so that was our reflection. Just getting a sense of what caused all those casualties and damage that it did. Now we're going to go on to respect. And with respect, what we're going to do is look at some of the medical heroes, those individuals that took care of the wounded. And at this point, Randy is also going to come on. I'm going to change clothes, and so he's going to now entertain you. And he'll be talking about the bugle as a form of communication. And then also, we'll be asking you to stand. In health and human performance, we know that you should not be sitting this long. And so we're going to ask you to stand while he plays taps. With that, and then I will be back.
hopefully will I be able to carry you back to the room. Yeah. You're okay? Good. Okay, I first started out with quite a number of different bugle calls, and the reason for doing that is during the Civil War, the bugle was an exceedingly important part of communication, or sometimes lack thereof. There was also a great deal of confusion as a result of all that. Now, the Army used a number of different methods of communication, one of which was a signal flag. And I'm sure we've probably seen all kinds of movies where they're doing this, using semaphores. Well, what is the problem with using signal flags in a battlefield where there wasn't any smokeless powder, it was all black powder? You can't see the flagman. Next thing, oh, this is great. We can use signal mirrors, yeah. Well, when there's a bunch of smoke on the battlefield, you can't always see the signal mirror, and that's kind of predicated on you having sunlight to be able to use those. Another method was courier. I'm sure we've all seen scenes in a movie where, here's the message, get this over to these guys, they got to do this, they got to do that. Well, both sides were highly trained. If you see somebody on horseback go on helicopter across the battlefield, that spot over there, that's probably a courier. Guess who's a bullet magnet? Many of them didn't make it. Okay, so again, no communication. We've all seen movies where, the fighting drum. Well, guess what? In the din of a battle, you can't hear the drum, nor can you hear the fight. So then they turn to the bugle. Why the bugle? Well, for one thing, it's very directional. Secondly, it can carry quite a ways. I can play a whole lot louder than I just did here. So you can carry these things. Now, here's the biggest problem with the bugle, is that the buglers, they're officers and people that are enlisted and on the battlefield, they had to know and understand over 50 bugle calls. They had calls for warnings. They had calls for formation. They had alarm calls. They had service calls. They had all kinds of calls. Now here's another problem. At the company level and greater, most officers were West Point or Military Institute trainees. So what are these officers going to do? Why reinvent the wheel? We already know all these bugle calls. However, the North bugle calls for charge and the South bugle calls for charge are one and the same. So here you are on the battlefield and somebody's sounding charge, somebody else is sounding retreat, and go, what do you want us to do? And that caused a great deal of confusion, and with confusion caused a great deal of casualties. You got troops charging when they really should have been retreating. There was a quote in the movie Gettysburg. How many people have seen Gettysburg? Outstanding movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. There's a scene where the troops with the 20th Maine are moving to Gettysburg, and Lieutenant Chamberlain is talking to one of the new inductees from the 2nd Maine that they just acquired. Well, one of the things he said, the problem with this man's army is the damn bugle calls. We got too many of them. Who's supposed to charge? Who's supposed to retreat? So, well, they have that problem solved. Turn all that up. Now, the way they did all, the way that they solved that is General Dan Butterfield, commander of the Army of the Potomac, recognized this is a huge problem. So what he did is, wait a minute, let's have a little bit of an identifier call for my guys. So when they heard the call, the very next call was for them. Then his guys go, that's us, we're supposed to charge. Or if they heard retreat, okay, we're out of here. Now, very short, that was right before Gettysburg that he did that. Most commanders at the regimental level on both sides recognized that's a great solution. Oh yeah, so very shortly thereafter, almost all regiments had their own little identifiers so that people would know, you're supposed to, no, we're supposed to retreat. So that clarified things a great. Anyway, the bugle was very instrumental in communication on the battlefield. But prior to the identifier calls, it was absolute chaos. There were thousands of letters written, or diaries kept by soldiers, and they would talk about, the call of the bugle, telling them what to do and how much that meant. Now, I'd like to digress for just a moment. I did sound taps. How many people in here would know the true origin of taps? Everybody does, right? Well, there's a romanticized version, and then there's the real version. The romanticized version is that, this Union doctor hears this person calling out for help on the battlefield, and that was Captain Ellicott, was his name. Oh, that they brought this dying Confederate soldier, and then it turns out to be his son, and in his pockets there was this melody, and they wanted to play it. Well, it's a myth. It's a great story. Absolutely a great story, but it's untrue. The real story of taps is that the same Dan Butterfield asked Oliver Wilcox Norton to do something with what they called the lights out call. Because taps is still used in the military as lights out. It's not just military honor gravesite. It's still used as lights out, time to shut up and go to sleep. But they didn't like the version that was being used at the time, which was actually stolen from the French. So this Oliver Wilcox Norton did a little bit of work with it and ended up with the melody we now know as taps. Many people think that it was instantly a big hit through the Civil War and was used all the time for deceased soldiers, and their burial and everything. It never became official in the United States Army until 1874. And then through what we now know as Department of Defense became official in 1894. So it took a while for it to get to where it is now. And I think a lot of people recognize, some of the lyrics. There are lyrics for that. The one that's probably most recognized is the second verse, "The day is done. Gone the sun from the lake, from the hills, down from the sky, all is well, safety rest, God is nigh." Taps for many, many people is an extremely stirring, very emotional moment in their lives, especially. I've done lots and lots of services graveside, and I've seen the biggest men fall to their knees and weeps. So it has the ability, it has the power to convey extreme emotion to people. Now, I wanted to very briefly mention the projectiles that were going around.
Yeah, we need to move on. Go ahead. Projectiles, and let's move.
The projectiles, the smallest round ball was for the 44 caliber sidearm. That was used a lot. But what a lot of people don't know is the artillery had hundreds of those in about the size of Campbell's, like a family-sized soup can. They put as many of those as they could into that. It was called canister shot, essentially turning the cannon into a giant shotgun. It was brutal. The next one was the 50